Wish TV. All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics. Focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Good morning and welcome to All Indiana Politics. I'm Garrett Bergquist. The 2024 legislative session is in the books. It was a whirlwind session with major implications for your children. Let's begin with schools. Lawmakers approved a measure to begin literacy tests in second grade and to require interventions for students who don't pass. Students would be held back a year if they fail the iRead test 3 times. Another bill requires parents of students who are chronically absent to meet with their child's schools to discuss ways to improve attendance. And there will be a computer science requirement to graduate from high school, beginning with the class of 2029. Lawmakers also sent the governor a partial fix for the attendant care program. That's the program that reimburses families for the cost of caring for medically complex children. The Family and Social Services Administration will face new reporting requirements. The agency will still move families who use the program to a daily fee model, but it will have to set a minimum level of reimbursement that would go directly to the families. The exact amount will be up to FSSA officials. Many of this year's bills have bipartisan support. One of the last bills approved will prohibit anti-Semitism in educational institutions. There's a bill to prohibit people or companies connected with foreign adversaries from buying farmland or land within 10 miles of a military installation. There's also legislation to expand child care workers' eligibility for On My Way pre-K and child care vouchers. And there's a bill to require doctors to offer long-acting reversible contraception to new mothers who use Medicaid. Here's what legislative leaders had to say after the session ended.
We were efficient, and it was a great session, a lot of productive things done. Obviously thrilled to get our 4 agenda bills, House Bill 1001 through 1004 passed. And I thought a very productive session for everyone. Really appreciate the cooperation amongst all 4 caucuses, and look forward to I think we position us well for 2025 and another exciting budget session. We did a lot of things that touched a lot of lives across Indiana. I'll just say, obviously for us, I think the biggest issue was around education. Senate Bill 1, House Bill 1001, I think are critical. We've got so many exciting things taking place across Indiana, economic development and taking place, and workforce, and making sure kids have the strongest education possible. So I think those are just 2 highlights, a bunch of really positive bills.
On the attendant care situation, I just talked to a mother of a medically complex child who says that even with this fix that was in 1120, she still might have to sell a car, even her house, just to keep a roof over her head. What do you say to those parents?
I think, one, let's wait and see what the real outcome of the change of the structure is. I think there's a lot of discussions being had without comprehensively fully seeing what's going to be, what implementation looks like. And we've put some important guardrails in there. We've obviously prioritized the families in this entire discussion, and that's been a real key to us. So, I would tell people, like anything else, let's wait and actually see what's implemented.
Well, I think, as far as missing the ball, I think that one of the things that stands out is the issue with attendant care. The available funds for parents that have to, on a day-in, day-out basis, attend for their children that have disabilities. I think we're missing the boat there. I thought Representative Pryor and Porter did a nice job there at the end talking about the issues that we had. And that's something that's really going to have to be addressed going forward. We know that's a problem, and we'll keep talking about it. We as a caucus talked about 3 or 4 times during session, just trying trying to bring the issue and attention to the issue. So we'll see how it goes. And then look, I think this continue the way the bills that I've seen attacking local government, you've seen the list, is really needs to stop. We, as always like to talk about being pragmatic problem solvers. I say that a lot, and it's true, and we've had a pretty good session ourselves when I think what our members were able to accomplish. And not just from individual bills, but what they were able to do with regard to stopping bad legislation, frankly, including today with some of the anti-labor language that was in the education bills. So I think if we can do that, if we can solve problems and recognize that we do have things to work on and stop what we feel are bad bills, we feel like it's a pretty good session for us.
This was a tough legislative session for us because of some actions that not only happened last year, but happened this year. We saw a piece of legislation come over to us that was unanimous out of the House of Representatives. And as I said on the floor today, had it not been for the relationship that I have and my caucus has with the other side of the aisle, we could have really had some divided things going in this chamber. But we stood strong. We talked to both sides of the issue instead of taking one position and running with it. And we listened to everybody, and we came up with a compromise that at the end of the day, isn't it a glorious thing when you can get a unanimous vote on a bill that started out with so much consternation?
I'm grateful for that. And as I said for the microphone, I mean, it's really an opportunity for us to, both sides of the aisle and both chambers that came together to craft something that was frankly pretty difficult to do, and in kind of a difficult environment. This bill had the ability to become super controversial, and to be able to get everybody behind it, and even people on the outside of the building on all sides behind it. I think it's just a sign about how good work can be done around here. It felt like a little more heavy lifting than I thought at the start, but that's how the process goes, right? People file bills that are important to them and that are important to Hoosiers across the state, and we're here to deal with them, so we did. And so I think by the end of the time there were some challenging days and some challenging bills to deal with, but so it may not have been quite as inconsequential, but happy to be done and feel like we did some good things.
Coming up, we hear from one of the nearly dozen Republican candidates running against Congresswoman Victoria Spartz. Welcome back. Patrick Malater says term limits and spending reform are by far the biggest reasons he's running for Congress. He's a retired CPA and one of nearly a dozen people running to succeed Congresswoman Victoria Spartz. He talked to our Phil Sanchez.
I have very little confidence that the existing members of Congress can make a difference in terms of actually working together to resolve a problem. I am much more willing to take a chance on younger minds, different minds that might have a interest in solving problems for the country, having different ideas, different voices enter into this, as opposed to the tribes we have here now in Washington, D.C.
Right.
So that's one. I think there's a few things that we can do to start to reduce the deficit. So, for example, I was a national director of a large CPA firm's tax practice. You know, one of the things that you notice in that particular role is that there are just a lot of really greasy loopholes in there that largely benefit the top half of the top 1% of people in the country. And there are hundreds of billions of dollars of those items in the budget. Well, that's one area we can start to raise revenue without necessarily changing any of the tax rates for people or deductions for regular people.
Closing those loopholes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Massive loopholes with literally hundreds of billions of dollars at stake. So that's one. Also, during the Clinton administration, they had pay-as-you-go type policies where, again, if you wanted to spend additional revenue, you had to find some offset so that you weren't increasing spending. So that's another simple step that we can take.
Okay.
You know, there's also just a number of areas where we do spend money right now that could be reevaluated.
Yeah, you also, prior to coming on and us having just a conversation briefly off camera, you mentioned that you have some other ideas that are a little bit different, that are not in line with the GOP, the traditional GOP. What are those?
Well, I probably have a much different viewpoint with respect to women's reproductive rights than any of the candidates in the race. So, as you know, Indiana enacted a pretty much near total abortion ban in the state, and for all intents and purposes put Planned Parenthood out of existence. So, certainly my wife and I, as you mentioned, have 5 children. I certainly embrace the sanctity of life, and I'm not pro-abortion. However, I am pro-choice. So what I mean by that is I think women need to have reproductive rights in a manner that are safe, legal up to a point, and rare. So what do I mean by safe? Well, that means that you should be able to go to a medical facility, including a Planned Parenthood, to have those types of services provided. From the standpoint of timing, I generally lean with a 12 to 14 week time frame to receive that type of care, irrespective of what the circumstances are, with additional time based on the viability of the child and the mother's health.
Right.
So, but if you think about the termination of Planned Parenthood here in Indiana, what a sexist thing to have done. Planned Parenthood just did not do abortions. They provided a whole series of other health care for women. So, for example, prenatal and postnatal care, contraceptive advice, cancer screening. So all of those types of services that were available to women went away through the process. And again, I think it was sexist to have done that.
Yeah. When you have these conversations on the campaign trail or with other fellow GOP members, what do they say? Do they give you any pushback when you bring these topics?
Well, I can't say that I've discussed these issues with many of the other candidates in the race, simply because I know that they are diametrically opposed from my viewpoints in the area. And look, I realize everyone in this race is entitled to their own beliefs. But to expect that any one candidate must agree with A, B, C, D, and E to be an authentic Republican or an authentic Democrat is just not sensible.
Yeah.
That means you're a robot, not someone that thinks for themselves. And again, I respect anyone's opinion in this particular area because it's very personal. Nevertheless, to completely lock women out of having a choice, I just disagree with.
Yeah. I'm almost out of time. So just quickly, what do you want folks to know about you, and also just give us an idea of how things are going on the campaign trail?
Sure. So again, my key issues are term limits. Secondly, I've got some public safety issues that are of significance to essentially hold prosecutors financially liable for these criminals that are going through the system on a revolving door basis, so that there are financial penalties that a citizen can recover from these prosecutors. I also have things related to education reform and tax reform, as we've talked about here. As far as how things are going on the campaign trail, I have a very grassroots campaign. I talk to a lot of individuals throughout the district, and I will tell you, it cleanses your soul because you hear a lot of different issues from the standpoint of how people are dealing with inflation, concerns about how they're going to send their kids to college, concerns about the border. So there are a number of issues that I guess there's a number of themes that you hear, but the economy probably is number one, and then probably the border being number two.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, good to see you. Thank you so much for coming in.
Be well. Thank you.
Yep.
Coming up, Indiana's best political team takes stock of a busy legislative session. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Democrat Laura Beck and Republican Mario Maslamani. Let's talk about the legislative session that just wrapped up Friday. Probably the biggest headliner this session was the attendant care program issue. Mario, let's begin with you. Did lawmakers do enough to help families who depend on that program?
I think it's going to depend. We need to make sure that the legislation actually has an impact and is implemented in, and then we'll know better if this is actually going to help Hoosiers or if this might actually hurt them. With the budget shortfall, I think that this is going to be key to make sure that there's more transparency in the program, in the agency. Also, I know that they had tried to restrict and tighten up some of the laws as it pertains to people abusing that program and using the services and getting the money that they shouldn't normally have for childcare.
Laura, I'll let you answer that as well, but also, how will this issue affect budget negotiations next year?
Well, I think there's a couple pieces that I would take away from this. One is that we would not be in this situation right now had we not had a better of accounting for what happened to the funds with FSSA, and also why is the state continuing to revert money back to the general fund to show that they have a surplus? So I think those are two larger issues which really do need to be addressed in the budget cycle. And I was really hopeful it would have been addressed last session. I think this bill does not go where it needs to go to help these families. I think when you have someone saying that they're going to have to sell their home and likely sell things so they can afford to care for their very severely disabled children and children who have very complex special needs, and telling them to wait and see is absolutely tone deaf. I mean, I just really believe that we have money in the surplus. These are families that desperately need these funds because they're caring for people with very complex needs. And to tell them to wait and see, or just say, oh, we'll take care of this in the budget session, to me just does not go far enough.
Democrats at the end of session complained that there were too many wholesale changes to bills behind closed doors. And for our viewers, the issue here is conference committees. That's the process by which the two chambers resolve differences between their versions of bills. Laura, does the General Assembly need to tighten the rules that govern what can happen in conference committee?
Well, I think anytime government operates with more transparency, it's better, frankly. And I do think that there always was a joke that you don't really want to, you know how the sausage is made, but you don't really want to see it being made, right? And that's what those conference committees are. But it has traditionally been something that it's happened for years, that this is how these things are hashed out. I think what we have to be mindful of is when you are in a situation where there's a supermajority, there are less guardrails, right, on that access and that transparency. And so, yeah, lobbyists and special interests can slip stuff in the last minute, and you have to really be on your toes to watch. But anytime I think government operates with more transparency, I think it's better for all of us.
Mario, do legislative Democrats have a point here?
You know, it's funny that they say that. I think they forget when Pat Bauer was Speaker of the House and the Democrats had the majority. They were doing same things or similar things back then, and they were more heavy-handed when they were doing it. So I think it's kind of funny and humorous that they're trying to now make arguments that on actions and behavior that they did themselves when they were in the majority. So I think this is really a nothing burger.
Now, this is for both of you. What was the biggest legislative win this session, and what was the biggest missed opportunity? Mario, you go first.
I think the biggest win is for Hoosiers. I think the Republicans this upcoming session were focused on literacy, not just childhood literacy, but also adult literacy. You know, they tightened up some of the rules. They focused on third grade education. It's amazing and shocking to me that when I looked at the stats, that 1 in 5 third graders aren't proficient in English. So they moved the eye-reading test to the second grade. They've also added a certain criteria to help teachers and set up summer school to get these children back on track for third grade, and put in other parameters in place to make sure that our kids are not just being passed on to 4th and 5th grade if they're not proficient in English, that we're actually holding these teachers accountable and also holding parents accountable with the new absentee bill where it requires parents that are, not taking
Mario, I've got about a minute left. Laura, I wanted to give you a chance to jump in on that as well. Biggest win, biggest missed opportunity.
It's all right. I'll just let Mario talk all day. That's totally fine with me. I don't really feel like there were a lot of wins this session. I think one of the biggest wins that they got out of there and didn't spend a lot more time here, less damage is done. I would say that the 13th check for retirees and for pensioners is important. And thanks to Representative Porter for doing that. I do think there were a lot of missed opportunities. There were opportunities to make families safer from gun violence. That was a missed opportunity. I think the attendant care program and not really fully putting what needs to go into that is also a missed opportunity. I think some of the other things that they pulled at the last minutes could also be very detrimental. So all in all, it was pretty much a wash for me.
We will leave it there. Thank you so much. We'll be back in a moment.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.